G'day guys, welcome to episode 72 of Ask Jack D. Today we take a great question from the floor of Facebook. A guy who's a digital friend of ours, has been participating with us online for a very long time, Abby Manu, about what is the hardest thing about the book I wrote. And I don't talk to you guys about Unprofessional, I talk to you about the next book I'm writing and talk about what's been challenging me and why this book is taking me infinitely longer than the last one, which was Unprofessional. And what I think we can do to become better thinkers, writers, business people, entrepreneurs, speakers, whatever it might be, how we challenge ourselves and what has been challenging me, but the growth that has also come from that. At the end, I'm asking of you, what's the hardest thing for those of you that write blogs or write books or do your own creative endeavors, what's the hardest thing for you? Let it roll and you'll see what the most challenging thing for me is, but why I'm loving the challenge and the hustle of it. G'day guys, welcome to episode 72 of Ask Jack and welcome back. Today we're taking a question from Facebook from Abby Manu who asks, hey Jack, which part of your book was the most hardest for you and why? Hashtag Ask Jack D. Abby Manu, this is a really good question. Really good question. Which part of my book was the most hardest? If we talk about Unprofessional, Unprofessional was quite an easy book for me to write, and I was able to write it quite quickly because it was everything that I had already been doing and talking about and writing about in different channels for such a long time, right? So Unprofessional was relatively easy. I wrote that book in 4 days, so that was a quick one, and it was literally about sitting down and writing, right? If I talked about my next book, which I'm probably going to call Unwritten. And Unwritten is about, as you guys know by now, I spend a lot of my spare time, that word always amuses me, spare time, but I spend a lot of my downtime studying individuals and movements and organizations that have changed the course of history forever, right? And whether I'm standing in the Sistine Chapel in Paris and looking up at the roof being educated about Michelangelo, who painted, he was a sculptor 500 years ago and painted the roof of the Sistine Chapel into wet plaster and sort of hid embedded messages through the symbolism of that particular painting. Whether it's Einstein who rewrote physics 100 years ago, whether it was Mandela who obviously led the anti-apartheid movement more recently, whether it's people like Oprah Winfrey or Richard Branson or even a lot less popular and exposed individuals and icons. The thing that frustrates me as I learn about all of these different people and all of these different moments in it, let him come, all of these different, Bear, come here, you can come. Bear's back for episode 72. Didn't take. You're a bit like your daddy, aren't you? You don't mind being in front of the camera? No. Yes. You're probably cuter than me though, right? It doesn't matter who I'm studying or what era it is or whether they were a sculptor or whether they were a painter or whether they were a physicist or whether they were an entrepreneur or whether they were a television talent, right? It doesn't matter who they were, what era they lived in, what they were doing. Their thinking, their approach toward building themselves, their approach toward leadership and how they implemented and executed their vision in the real world. Doesn't matter who it is and what era, their thinking and how they approached it is almost the same in every case, right? There are inexplicit commonalities and characteristics between, masterful people who have managed to get a hell of a lot out of themselves, touch the hearts and minds of so many others, inspire thousands or millions of people toward one common vision. And what frustrates me a little bit is that these stories aren't more popularized, right? Like for every 1,000 people out there, how many actually know about Michelangelo? We all know the name, but how many people know what he did when he grew up and how he learned how to be a painter and how much of a rebel he was and how much of an independent thinker he was and his spiritual views and the conflict he was having with the Catholic Church and the embedded messages he hid in the roof of the Sistine Chapel knowing that they'd be discovered one day. There's so much commonality between these different stories. Independence of thought, rebellion, an absolute need to challenge the status quo, not for the sake of challenging the status quo, but because they truly believe that there is a better way to do something. Same is true of Monet with Impressionism, right? they were protesting against the status quo. These people were always misfits. They were always often rejected by the status quo and had to build their own institutions in protest against the old guard. It's the same with disruption in business today, right? So Unwritten for me is about, firstly, there's somewhat spiritual concepts about how do we live a life aligned to purpose, how do we find purpose and then live a life aligned to it, how do we get the most out of ourselves, how do we lead a mission-based life, how do we draw from lessons and wisdoms from the greats of the past in order to be the best versions of ourselves today? And then how do we move toward actualizing a vision in the future? So that's what the book I'm writing now is about. So Unprofessional took me 4 days to write. This book is probably taking me like 6 or 8 months, right? And the challenging part is grappling with all of these really macro, large concepts and trying to distill them down into a commentary that is easy to read, easy to digest, that anybody can get it, that a primary school teacher could pick up and teach her class or his class about Michelangelo if she wanted to. And how do you build that narrative throughout while honouring the factual integrity of each of the stories, right? So there's a lot of research and fact-checking and dates and times and names and titles and institutions to get right? So it's marrying the macro, putting it into a cohesive narrative while getting the detail right through research is the most challenging part of this book, which I'm enjoying because it pushes us, right? I think, when we're writers or when we're speakers, it's really easy just to speak and it's really easy just to write, and there's so much magic in that. But when you can challenge yourself to think larger and become more grounded in research both at the same time, it forces you to expand your own horizons, right? So this book, although I have been studying and practicing a lot of the principles I'd like to think that I'm writing about for a very long time, putting it into a cohesive narrative for other people to read and love and be inspired by and impacted by is what I've been battling with for a few months now, and absolutely loving it because it's forcing me to become better. Really, really good question. Who asked that question, Wiz?
That was Abby Manu.
Abby Manu from Facebook. Good question, brother. For those of you that write, whether it's blogs, books, whatever it is, in the comments below, what is the hardest thing for you about writing? Tell us what that is in the comments below. I'll be there, guys. Thank you for watching episode 72, Ask Jack D. Keep the questions coming. We are loving the engagement coming from the community. I look forward to speaking with you guys, as does Little Bear, in episode 73.
I've been there, I've just actualized a wish that I dreamed as a kid. Cause I'm lying